Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So I've got this little dresser that I'd actually been saving or using as the cash register table inside the dress shop Dollhouse, but I really wanted to cover up that mahogany tone wood and kind of give it a different look to kind of make it blend a little bit more or blend a little bit better with the decor of the dress shop. And here I'm adding a second coat of this caramel colored acrylic paint because I want to do a coat of the linen tone paint on top and then distress it. Now, if you notice, I am painting the little dresser on all sides because the part that would normally be up against the wall, I expect for it to be facing the customers. So I am doing all sides. So now that I've given the little mahogany dresser 2 good coats of the caramel color paint, I'm going to allow it to dry and I'm going to work on my idea for the drawer fronts. Now I'm going to use a technique that it used to be very popular many years ago, and I guess it is very popular in some circles now, but we used to call it decoupage, and I've never used it on any of my furniture, but I thought it would be kind of fun for this project. So I'm adding a little bit of glue, and this is actually weld bond glue, and I'm giving a nice ample coat to the front of this drawer front. Now I've already removed the handles to it and everything. And I actually removed the original stain color from it as well with lacquer thinner. Now this is a very familiar print wallpaper and I cut it into strips. Now if you prefer, you can cut your wallpaper in perfect strips so it'll align and you don't have to trim any of the excess off. But I trimmed it down to a reasonable size, and when it dries, I can trim the excess with my craft knife or some really sharp scissors. And you can see me here in this frame just blending it in and making sure it's laying nice and flat all the way out to the ends of the drawer. And then I'm trimming it with my scissors. And here you can see I'm going along the bottom with the scissors to trim off the excess. Now I would advise that you make sure that it's completely dry before you attempt to trim the wallpaper. Especially if you're using inexpensive wallpaper, because when it becomes damp, it has a tendency to tear. And here I'm just showing you again what I did, adding the glue across the drawer front, gently lining the paper up and laying it into the glue, smoothing everything out, and then trimming off the excess. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, this is a very familiar print wallpaper because I've definitely used it on more than one wall in my doll houses. Now we're getting to the Mod Podge part. So I'm adding a nice thin coat of the Mod Podge on the top of it to kind of seal it in, and that was a part of the process of what people used to do with things like this years ago to create this look. Now if there's another step that I'm missing, dolls, let me know in the comments. Now this process is called decoupage, and it was very popular in the 70s. Now after I added Mod Podge to all the drawer fronts on top of the wallpaper, I allowed them all to dry. And then I went on to add the linen colored paint on top of the caramel color acrylic paint. Now I'm doing it kind of in a dry brushing fashion. I don't want the coat to be really thick because I want the little dresser to look aged and weathered and not brand new. Now after I got my first initial coat on the little dresser, I realized I did want the coat to be a little bit heavier because I want the weathered look to come from like sanding to make it look worn. So I added another coat. And then immediately after I finished the second coat, I grabbed my really fine sandpaper while it was still damp and began to buff off or sand off the areas where I wanted it to look worn. Now this is another part of the process that you do as much or as little as you like, depending on the look you're trying to achieve. So I did a lot of my sanding around the edges or the corners, which to me would be naturally where an item like this would show wear and tear. Now while that's drying, let me show you what else I did. So dolls, I didn't want to use the traditional drawer handle pulls from this little chest. I wanted to make my own. So I used these little bead spacers. They kind of look like dangles, but I attached them to the little pins that I normally use for my pin hinges. So I cut off the tip and then I added a tiny purple seed bead, which I'm using in order to keep it secured to the pin. Now you can use a seed bead in any color. Mine just happened to be purple. And here I'm trying to kind of hold it at an angle so you can see what I mean. Because if you don't secure it with the seed bead, it might slide right off of the spacer bead. Now here I'm just showing you again what it looks like after you got it all assembled. So, dolls, I'm about to share something that I absolutely would not recommend, although it is what I did. And I'm just showing you how it went. I lined up the first drawer that I completed. I used it as a guide to create my second hole, which is not a good idea because what if the first hole was wrong and now the second and the third will be wrong? So it's not a good idea, but again, it's what I did. Now here I am using my manual hand pin drill, and although it's manual, you don't want to drill towards your hand. This is not a good example of what you should do. Always be cautious of your hand and fingers when you're working with tools. Now to secure your little handles, you want to put glue on the little pin before you put it in the hole. So just enough to secure it and make it stay put, but not enough to make it glunky. Now, by the time I got to this stage, I was really excited. So I was moving along to get the rest of them finished. Now here I want to show you dolls again. Although I'm using the wrong technique, I want to show you a safer way to drill the holes. So I repented and I held them in the position and I'm drilling down rather than toward my hand. So I guess I could consider this to be a safer way to do the wrong thing. Now, after I was done adding all of the handles to all the drawers, I went on to add a little bit of my watered down alcohol and paint wash to the edges that I had sanded down because they looked a little bit light and I wanted it to look a little worn and dark and dirty. And again, while the dark paint was still damp, I kind of rubbed it and smudged it a little, again, to give it the old worn down look. And here is my completed little chest. I think it turned out really, really cute. And it turned out so cute, I don't even know if I want to use it in the dress shop anymore. I'm kind of thinking it really looks nice up in this new attic bedroom. So now I've created a new dilemma for myself because if I use it up here in the attic bedroom, what do I use downstairs? So dolls, I've got to come up with an idea really quick because currently the cash register is on the floor next to the waste can. So let me get back to my craft table so I can figure this out. Now, if this is your first time watching and you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe and always look for me on Mondays after 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you enjoyed this video, let me know what you liked the most in the comments. I'm so excited about you dolls being here because it means so much for me, for you all to come here every week to allow me to share. I truly consider this a privilege. And until next time, I'm looking forward to seeing you right here on Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.